Well, welcome everyone. We are grateful to have you as a part of this virtual event tonight. We have the pleasure of speaking with Ernest Kyoko from Cure International. And Ernest, along with his team, has done just a fantastic job developing a theology of disability. And what that's going to do is help us all learn better how to interact with those who have disabilities as we engage in healthcare mission work. It's really important to understand the ways in which cultures that we grow up in have influenced the way that we see certain people groups. And oftentimes, those ways that we view certain people who are different from us, be it culturally or on the level of physical ability, things like that, can often be distorted and in need of reformation. And so tonight, it's going to be super helpful to hear from Ernest on a biblical perspective of people with disabilities to better equip those of us engaging in healthcare missions to better serve this population and to meet them with the love and the character of Jesus. So thanks for joining us. We hope you find this conversation really beneficial and practical for your service. All right, Ernest, thank you so much for joining us for this virtual event. We're really, really glad to have you here and excited for the conversation today.
Thank you, Luke.
Yeah, of course. So do you mind sharing just a bit about yourself and the organization that you're working with? We'd love to hear just a little backstory on you and why we're talking today.
Thank you once again. My name is Ernest Kyoko. I'm based in Nairobi. I'm the Chief Ministry Officer at Cure International. I've had the privilege to serve with Cure International for the last 20 years. I joined Cure right from my theological seminary immediately I finished. I worked in the Kenyan Cure Hospital for about 13 years until 2017. And from 2018, I now work from the regional level. And my work as the Chief Ministry Officer is to support the spiritual directors of the 8 hospitals Cure us to ensure that we are intentional and integrated ministry. Our ministry focuses on patients as well as co-workers, discipleship, and also connecting with churches and pastors in the communities. So basically, my work is to ensure that I support the organization to realize our mission through the spiritual directors.
Very cool. Very cool. So the spiritual direction there, which it lends itself well to the conversation we're having today, focusing in on a theology of disability, which before you guys presented this topic idea, I hadn't ever heard of that topic as an idea. So very excited to hear about this framework that you guys have of working with people with disabilities and giving us a theological framework to understand that as it impacts work that we do on the mission field. So let's start kind of high level then. When you guys say theology of disability, how can you describe what that means?
Good question. Let me begin here. Even before we developed the curriculum on theology of disability, we were doing several things around children with disabilities from a biblical perspective. And one day we had to decide on harmonizing and standardizing our thinking, our trainings. And the fact that we are dealing with people with disabilities and we are a Christian organization, that is how the idea of theology of disability kind of glued together. And therefore, when we talk about theology of disability, this is what basically we are saying. Just as we know, theology is the study of God. So theology of disability, we are saying we want to study how God thinks about people with disabilities.
Very cool. That's so clear, crystal clear. Yeah. So theology being the study of God, and so theology of disability being what does God think, or how does God think about those with disability? Sure. Very cool. And then you guys have developed a training around this. So what's a theology of disability training look like?
Good question as well. Theology of disability training is a 2-day or a 3-day training that was put together with a focus to train pastors, church leaders, lay leaders, or even opinion shapers in the community on how they can understand and respond to people with disabilities in a biblically guided way, so that eventually we can help these people realize their God-given potential.
Very cool. Yeah. So really equipping all the different facets of people who are interacting with these people,
Yes.
giving them real great tools and equipping them to interact based on a solid foundational understanding of how God views people with disabilities.
Yeah. Yeah, and that equipping is three-sided. There is the knowledge side of things, there is the skill side of things, and there's the character side of things. Because as pastors and church leaders, there's a way we need to engage the community out there. And so you need to have some knowledge about it, you need to have some skills on how to talk to these people, but also a certain character, so that when you go there, you help these people feel appreciated, and then see what can you do as God expects to help these people out of their current situation.
Yeah, it's awesome. So what are some of the objectives in this training that you guys are focusing on?
Okay, thank you. There are several. Let me just mention three or four.
Okay.
One of the objectives is to make sure we empower the pastors, the lay leaders, whoever that we train, with a biblical understanding of disability and people with disability. So there's the biblical understanding. That is number one. Number two, we also help them understand how to respond to people with disabilities as guided by the scripture. So they understand what the Bible says about that, but also what does the Bible say we should respond to them, like with love, with real faith or action, you know. And number three, we are also using this training as a way to help the church, empower them with the right knowledge so that they can challenge wrong myths and beliefs out there. And not only just to challenge, but also to change those wrong myths. Why do I say so? We know there are so many issues out there. You know, people with disabilities are cursed, the work of evil spirits, bad omen. But what does the Bible say? Are those beliefs right? And we know most of those beliefs really ostracize these people. They feel humiliated, frustrated. So we are using this training to challenge and to change those harmful beliefs. But number four out of many, we are also empowering the church to be the voice for the voiceless. Through this training, we are telling the church, this is your role to advocate for these people, to include them in their churches, to stand for their rights, help them to be participating in the church. And you know, by so doing, we are trying to create a society that appreciates and incorporates people with disabilities, first and foremost, beginning with the church or the pastors. And by so doing, we are helping these people with disabilities realize their God-given potential in one way or the other.
So good. So starting with just a teaching and understanding of the biblical view on this, and then kind of transitioning that new knowledge into action on a personal level, all the way out into like, what does it mean for the church? Yeah. Yeah, just such a great framework, and very, very clear, and I love how you guys have that built out so practically. So I imagine a lot of people could benefit from this, you know, as you mentioned, kind of a whole demographic there. What would you say to you know, the audience here for this event is healthcare professionals of all different kinds, you know, from nurses to doctors to PAs and nurse practitioners, right? So a lot of different healthcare professionals. How could they benefit from a training like this as they think about using their healthcare skills in the mission field?
Thank you so much. In my view, this training can help such cadres of leaders to have a good theological understanding, first and foremost,
Yeah, yeah.
of who are these people with disability and what does God think about them? What does God want us as co-workers, as health practitioners, respond to them? In other words, this training for such groups of workers would be a training to help them integrate their profession with their faith in God by being more practical. Because it is one thing to say, I'm a Christian, but it's another thing to say, as a Christian worker, how do I respond to somebody with a disability? So the training gives you knowledge, gives you some stepping stone on how you can engage. And part of it also includes a counseling. Let me give an example. One of the topics we study is what does it mean to be created in the image and likeness of God?
Yeah.
When you have a proper understanding that the somebody I'm serving is equally created in the image and likeness of God, like me, the caregiver, somebody has a body, soul, and the spirit, so to say, then I will respond to them with appreciation. I will not look at their shortness of the leg, the body side of things. I will realize this person is not just the body, but they have a soul, they have a beautiful spirit, and I should be able to respond to them wholeheartedly. So it kind of gives them a stepping stone to become effective and impactful. So it has a bearing of integrating our faith and profession. And because of that integration, then it brings some level of effectiveness and impact.
Yeah. So good. Yeah. So, a lot of a lot of people, as they're thinking about entering the mission field, are looking for tools and resources to equip themselves for effective service in missions. And this just sounds like such a practical example of that, right? You're going to be interacting with people with disabilities on the mission field, and this training can be a really great way to equip you and to learn about this demographic and how to effectively respond and to develop a good biblical framework for understanding and relating to these people. Yeah. Awesome. Very cool. So you mentioned a little bit ago about some of the beliefs about disability that in a lot of ways oppress this people group. So can you talk a little bit about some of the beliefs that are out there about people with disabilities?
Yes. And I want to say this belief is not read in books. I've had them myself in my field. And the fact that, again, by God's grace, for 20 years, this has been my area of operation. So some of these beliefs are not what you read in the book. You hear them with the patient themselves. And so this includes, for example, there is a huge belief for you to have a child with a disability is a punishment from God. And it comes from the understanding that if you do something wrong or something comes out wrong, God should not be happy with you. So there are people who think God is punishing them for a certain sin they did. That's why the child is born with a certain disability. Number two, as we know, in a bigger share of the traditional beliefs in Africa, for example, there is that idea of believing the spirits. And so there are people who believe to have disability is the work of evil spirits in the child, in the life of the child, or even the parents. That's another big issue. Of course, there are those issues of bad omen. Maybe somebody saw your child when the child was so young with red eyes. Sometimes I don't understand this language of red eyes, and they believe I was seen by a witch doctor or somebody with red eyes. That's how my child developed disability.
Yeah.
The others also believe that it could have been an ancestral issue where something should have happened with our ancestors. They are not happy with us. Maybe we failed to follow certain rules when the child was being born, and so we are being punished by our ancestors. These are some of the beliefs really that capture many people. I would say there are some people still believe it could be normal, but many places, even you do research, over 95%, the presence of disability is associated with a negative thing.
Hmm.
not a positive thing. That's where the trouble is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. And so yeah, lots of spiritual aspects there too. And I see like how much there's a lot of worldview tied into where a
Mm.
lot of these beliefs come from. And so
Yes.
yeah, how would you challenge or encourage or equip American healthcare workers who may find themselves in some of these contexts where, we have our own set of beliefs in the United States around people with disability that in a similar way oppress them, but in a lot of ways less spiritual, right? I'm sure there are people groups here in the States that, might take the viewpoint that God's punishing you for something. That's a common one. But some of the more kind of spiritual side of it is not so familiar to a lot of our audience here. So how would you
Mm.
encourage people tuning into this conversation to move into these spaces where that is a big part of the belief system around disability, and how would you equip them to respond to that?
Thank you so much. That's one of the most interesting conversations I have seen. And let me try to explain with a story, a short story that I experienced in the Kenyan hospital where I was.
Yeah.
We used to receive some patients, I wouldn't say which area, but in one of the regions in Kenya. And when the child comes in the hospital and the mother, they have a huge belief in the spirits, in the witchcraft thing. So many times we would see children with charms around their hands, arms, or even on their waists. And you cannot go to theater with those things. You have to remove them. And I remember there was this conversation, not once or twice, where the doctors have to talk to you as a chaplain and tell you, talk to this mother. The child cannot get in theater with anything that is not allowed there. And so you find yourself with the mother confronting her with the reality here, where you are telling her, your child can go to theater without this protective device and come out well.
Hmm.
Because for the mother, they believe this is a protective thing, whether on the wrist or on the waist. And
Hmm.
so that is an area of confrontation to their belief system. And
Yeah.
so when you come in, you explain to them, you know what, there is God in heaven. He's going to take care of your child, even without this. And let's pray about it. Let's trust God on it. And I've seen some of them reluctantly agree, others joyfully agree. And of
Yeah.
course, now they remove and they take the child to surgery. The child comes back and the child, nothing happens bad. That is one thing that confronts the mother that, hey, there's another belief. You can still trust God's people, God's
Hmm.
power, and things can still work. And because of that, the mother decides to give her faith to God because what she knew was her protection has been proved otherwise.
Yeah.
Another power is in action. And two things happen. You challenge their faith in spirits or witchcraft and all that. And now you show them there is somebody who has made it. And by their coming to the hospital, they go home with a child who has been corrected their disability. And they also go home with faith in
Hmm.
God. So two things happen.
Yeah.
Those are the moments where you say it was worthy for this child to come to the hospital. And for me, these are issues now where you say it's beyond rational. It's not just thinking. It
Hmm.
is true there are witchcrafts and evil spirits, but when you come to an hospital where the co-workers, the nurses, the doctors believe in God, we place our faith to action, and the mothers can be able to see it is one. And
Hmm.
so I would want to say for anyone listening to this that these things are real, but the power of God is also in action, and it has become a transformational place. The hospitals become really a place of privilege, a unique opportunity to challenge beliefs and show it is true. You can change what people believe, and you can allow God as a fellow health worker to use you to transform the world of these people.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's where the ministry happens right there. I think this is why
Mhm.
the area, there's a lot of different ways of doing missions, but there's something
Yes.
so uniquely special about healthcare missions in this way, where there's this real practical need meeting, interactions happening with people and solving
Yes,
real problems, and at the same time challenging their faith and the way
yeah.
the belief systems. Very cool.
And I'll tell you something, Mark. This is what we call ministry by incarnation,
Yeah.
not by imitation,
Yep.
where we as healthcare workers, we give ourselves to be used by God. Our faith, our hands, our love, our time. And that is how people come to realize these are different people. And I'll say this in brief. For me, the hospital space generally, or anyone in the ministry they are dealing with the sick people, it is one of the unique opportunities to show what God can do through you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So good. Yeah, absolutely. I hope everybody tuning in finds that encouraging. It's so good. So let's shift a little bit and talk about some of the challenges that are faced by people with disabilities. I'd like to get a better understanding of what it's like to be in their shoes.
Thank you. There are enormous challenges.
Yeah.
And I must say, most of the challenge emanate from their environment, their communities. Before I mention the challenges, let me say one thing I observed out of reality.
Hmm.
One time I was teaching this theology of disability in Zimbabwe somewhere, and I made a definition using the UN definition, local definition of people with disabilities. And it happened inside the congregation. One of the people who attended the training was somebody with a disability, according to me. I mean, he had his own challenges physically. And he rose his hand and said, wait a minute, why are you defining us? Why don't you ask us how we should define ourselves? And I came to realize, to be very honest, many times we are the ones who cause the pain they go through, beginning with us defining them.
Hmm.
When we say they are impaired, did they say so? When we say they are limited, did they say they are limited?
Hmm.
And so one of the biggest challenge they face, it is being defined by us, not them. That is the first thing. And I learned that the hard way because that guy challenged me and said, don't define me. Allow me to say whether I'm limited or not, whether
Hmm.
I'm cared or not, which I felt that was a big thing. So I
That's
must say the biggest challenge begins with how we define.
yeah.
So how we define them now characterizes the other things. Like, because of that, they feel discriminated.
Hmm.
You find they are not given slots in the church. You find the church does not have wide doors to have a wheelchair go through. The
Hmm.
church does not have uh, toilets that are fit for such people. Even if they come to the church, because it has a ramp, for example, the dais doesn't have. So what are you telling them? You can join us, sing with us, but if you have something to do, you can't do like everybody else up there. So there is that level of discrimination, and that builds to something else of lack of inclusion
Hmm.
and lack of participation. And when you tie all these together, these people walk around feeling less human
Yeah.
because they feel you have not given us to do what we are made, what we can do. At the same time, they walk around feeling a huge sense of stigma, you
Hmm.
know, and this shows up even in the marketplaces where you don't want to talk to so and so. For example, you can imagine if you are talking to a deaf person and you don't know the deaf language, so to say, we walk away from them. I mean, what does that send a message to them? They feel like we are less a human being, and that stigma carries around with them. So there are so many challenges, but the point is these challenges make them really feel less human. And then it escalates on the course of life. For example, you find many of them, if they are children, they will never go to school.
Hmm.
Because from the word go and the way we define them, we don't think they can perform. So they miss out on education. And missing out on education means you may never get employment. Never getting employment means you may never get married. You may never get to make up in life. So they have also issue of lack, failure to go to school. On the other hand, because of this discrimination right from the word go, by and large, they are neglected. And what does that mean? They lose the quality of life and quantity of life. What do I mean by that? If there was chaos in town and there were people with disabilities, they cannot run. They will be stepped on, they will experience violence, and we know in some cases, even for the ladies, they can experience abuse, let's say rape. That compromises the quality of life. And by extension, if they don't get treatment, it means also they cannot have quantity. The length and the quality of life is compromised. So these are just part of the challenges that they go through.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing that you started with our words, like the words that we use with these people. And it it just brings to mind for me like how much power our words
Yeah.
have to create outcomes for people. And so, I mean, so much everything else seemed to kind of stem from that place. Because
Yeah.
it changes the way the way they view themselves and the way everybody else views them, and then by implication, the way things are set up around them, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why, without repeating myself, theology of disability comes in to change that definition by saying, wait a minute,
Hmm.
we call you this. What
Yeah.
does God call you? We define you this. What does the Bible say about that? We treat you this. What does the Bible say about it? So the theology of disability, among other things, also comes in to address
Hmm.
how we define these people.
Yeah. So yeah, at the core, changing the words that we use, and then
Right.
by default, changing so many things downstream from there.
Precisely. Yeah.
So good. So yeah, that kind of touches on the next question here. What's the expected impact and outcomes of a theology of disability?
Good, thank you. There are many expectations, but looking at the people who go through this training, one thing we expect for them, it is to change the way they look at the people. So that is one. What does that mean? When a pastor walks into to this training, we believe by the time they go away, they themselves will have changed the way they define these people, the way they look at it. Again, that is the beginning point. So we have to, this training changes the worldview for the participants. Number two, because of that changed perception and worldview, so we expect more inclusion of these people in communities and churches and everywhere they go. They can be appreciated and incorporated. And incorporation, which is inclusion, goes all the way to participation. So we expect those who go through this can have more time to allow people with disabilities to participate in issues. Allow me to give you, and I go back to the church because I know most of us are believers and understand what that is.
Mhm.
If there is a church that cannot allow people with disabilities to participate, in my view, that church has some disability of its own. So we expect through this training, these people gain more rights to participate because they are part and parcel of any community of believers. And of course, another expectation will be in the long run, we shall diffuse, we shall really take away the bad world, the myths, the bad omen, the evil spirits. And guess what? In the long run, we are building a more accommodative environment, societies, people with disabilities.
Yeah, which in the end is building the kingdom of heaven. It's like,
Wonderful.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, it's just a one facet of this whole collective thing that we're doing as followers of Jesus. And this is a really
Yes.
practical way that we're doing that.
Yes.
Very cool. Yeah. So what are I'd love to hear some of the like benefits if you have stories or however you want to share, how a theology of disability has benefited patients and people with disabilities.
Um, I think the best way to answer that question is to give an example. I would name the name of the person, but I would say the biggest benefit in a nutshell, it is to help people with disability realize their God-given potential. That's the bottom line
Mm-hmm.
before giving the story. It happened that there's one of the patients I know right now is a great man of God, and he came to one of the hospitals and he stayed in the hospital for about 2 years. He underwent treatment with a certain disability. almost everybody gave up on him because it became tedious, kind of a routine, and God was kind of using that to train us on patience and perseverance. But long story short, this guy was able to recover from his challenge. And then from there, he was able to grow. And right now, he has advanced in his education. He may not have gone back to his normalcy like walking no more. He may still have the disability, but it was controlled that it cannot lead to be fatal, so to say. And right now, he has become a great mobilizer of resources to children with disabilities and is able now to provide wheelchairs and Bibles to other people in our hospitals and beyond. What am I saying? If this young man never got attention medically and spiritually, maybe right now would be nowhere, and maybe you would never have risen to a point where treatment happened and he continued studies and now he's giving back to the society. Probably, I suspect he has given more wheelchairs and Bibles than anybody in this forum. That's my feeling.
Wow.
What is that? Through the treatment he got, he was able to realize his calling. And right now he's actualizing his potential because some treatment happened. So what this training and the entire theology of disability is trying to help people and mobilize people to have the right worldview and eventually all run together, rally together. Whether you are a doctor, you do your part, the pastor do your part. And eventually we attend to these people with disabilities the best way we can. And through that we spike their potential.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so how does all of this, or how has all of this influenced churches and communities where this stuff is really playing out?
I would say by and large, it has challenged and changed many pastors and churches on how they approach people with disabilities. And again, I want to use one of the trainings, the whole issue of what does it mean to be created in the image and likeness of God. Normally, we are in a society where people value beauty, wealth, power, and God, which is almost opposite of people with a disability because they are not seen as beautiful or handsome people. They are not seen as people with power. They're not seen as people with wealth. So when we have this training out there and the churches embrace it, they are able now to say, you know what? Don't look at this person from a body perspective. Realize they also have a soul and they have a spirit. And so it has really changed the way the church looks at these people. It has brought a huge revolution. Why do I say so? I know testimonies of pastors who have said, because of the training, I am now going to change the doors of my church. I realized it was narrow. Now I have to widen it. I don't have to be reactive, but proactive. I don't have to wait for somebody with a wheelchair to show in my church. I'm going to create the door by faith. I know others have challenged and they told me in person. From today, as we plan for church development, one of the developments we are going to make as a priority, it is to build disability-friendly toilets. So if I was to answer your question in another way, it has influenced the church to be more proactive in their approach to this, more transformational, and also more biblical.
It's great.
So I find this to be really a real thing. And I can point out to pastors and churches that have done. There are churches that do not have a ramp where a wheelchair will pass. From that training, they go and build a ramp. That is proactiveness and getting to transformation. There are pastors who said, going forward, we shall create one Sunday in a time where now we are going to have a week to talk about disability or disability awareness week. These are something I've seen and participated out of invitation. So there is a lot of proactiveness, transformativeness, and biblical approach when churches have gone through this training.
Yeah, so clear. So obviously there's a lot of practicality for the audience tuning into this conversation to take a training like this. Is it possible for them to do this training? For many people viewing are here in the United States. Not all of them. Some of them may be, even in your neck of the woods in Nairobi. But for those who maybe live in the States or elsewhere, is it possible for them to take this training? And if not, how would you point them in a direction of developing a better theology of disability and having it impact their work in healthcare missions?
Yeah, thank you. There is a possibility, and it's important to highlight because I don't want for us to sound selfish as Cure International. I know there are also other theology of disability training somewhere out there. For us, we tailored it to be more contextual to Cure needs, something like that. And therefore, our current training, it can be taken in person, and sometimes we do it online. I have done it to some people online, and we can still do that. Sometimes we do it, most of the times actually, we do it physically where people gather together. So would there be people willing to go through our training? We don't mind. We can always plan for such an event.
Okay, very cool. Yeah. So to anybody tuning in, if this is something that's interesting to you, we'd love to hear from you, and you'll have an opportunity to share that interest, and we can help coordinate that for you. But that's really the end of the conversation today. And Ernest, just want to thank you so much for sharing your experience and sharing more about this idea, and really just helping us catch a vision for there's so many different ways of looking at what missions is, but at the end of the day, it's restoring the world that we live in, making it more conducive to the flourishing of all people, especially those who are most vulnerable, people with disabilities being, the primary example here today. And the work that we do in missions is to that end of restoring the world. And so this is just such a perfect example of that. So thanks for sharing about your work.
Thank you, Luke. Once again, I appreciate for the privilege you have given me to share part of what we are doing. I must acknowledge it's a great opportunity, but also say it's not a one-man's issue. It has come a long way. We have collaborated with many others, and I think it's also important to highlight that part of this information we also gathered from people like Johnny Erickson, Johnny Tanda, I'm sure you're familiar, Kupenda organization. So there are others who have also been instrumental to shape the way we have come up with our training. So thank you once again for the privilege, and may God bless you. And I wish all of you well as you go on to think about theology of disability. It's all about being intentional, integral, and impactful when you're engaging these people with disabilities. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ernest.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, thank you all again for being here tonight. It was great to have you. And one quick thing before you head out, wanted to remind you that the Global Missions Health Conference 2024 is coming up on November 7th through the 9th. Registration is now live. You can head over to medicalmissions.com, click on the GMHC tab at the top of your screen, and that'll take you to a registration page. You can attend either in person or virtually. Either way, we'd love to have you. It's going to be a great experience. And so we hope to see you here in November. Have a great night, and we'll see you next month for our last virtual event of the year. Thanks.
Our world is in chaos. I don't need to tell you anything about our world. One of the things that thrills me in this very needy, dark world is to see God at work in spite of all.
I'd like us to think this morning how vital it is for each of us to fix our eyes on Jesus, to run our race with our eyes fixed on Him.
So it's a simple prayer that I try to pray every day, and I would want to challenge you with. Just very simple. Jesus, give me your eyes for the one. Help me to see people the way you see people. I think if you do that, I mean, it's a dangerous prayer because you can't pray that prayer daily and it not impact your days.